welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new here. My name is Andrea M, and this is the Oz X-Files, The Truth Is Out Back. And today is a special subscriber requested video from my beautiful subscriber Sam. She's been with me from the beginning. She always comments, she always tells me what she thinks of the videos, and she is very good on the suggestions. So this was a video she requested a little while back before I got sick, and she wanted to hear a few of the Aboriginal traditions and legends, and I couldn't think of any better way to share that with you guys than some of these wonderful Dreamtime stories. And I've absolutely always loved the Dreamtime stories. I can remember being a little kid, and I had a lot of Indigenous friends that I went to school with, and they were just the most wonderful families. And their elders used to come to the school to teach us about the Dreamtime and the stories. And I remember, we'd all sit in a big circle, and they'd sit and they'd teach us about it. And it was just so wonderful, and I loved it so much as a child. I've always wanted to sort of pursue more of that in adulthood as well. And what better place to do it than here? And what better day to do it than for Sam's requested video. So thank you, Sam, for your constant support. It is so much appreciated. I'm always happy when I see your comments pop up. And I have a lot of other subscribers who are commenting to me a lot. I have a lot of people that contact me about cases that we cover in the other videos, and it's always so lovely to talk to you guys. And just on that, if you're not subscribed yet and you are enjoying the videos and you are enjoying this channel, please do consider subscribing, because it would help me out a ton in the YouTube algorithm. Also like, comment and share, because that also helps me out. YouTube notices everything, and we are trying to get to our first 1,000 subs. A lot of people probably don't know this, but to become a part of the YouTube partnership program, which allows your videos to become monetized, and then you can take advantage of other things for YouTube, you need to reach 1,000 subscribers. So if you guys would like to help me out with that and help me to reach my goal, that would be amazing. I'm looking to get monetized so that I can have an income, so that I can buy better recording equipment and better equipment for Clarence Valley Paranormal, for our paranormal videos, just in the earnest thought of making better videos for you guys, so be more enjoyable for you and for us too, because we all like to create our content in the best way that we can. So if you want to help us out with that, that would be amazing and would be greatly appreciated. So before we begin the video, seeing as it is an Indigenous Dreamtime video, we also need to pay respects to the traditional custodians of the lands in all of the different regions, tribes and localities in Australia. There's a different tribe for a lot of different places around here. We have the Gambanya, we have the Bundjalung, heavily represented where I live, and there are other tribes in other regions of Australia. I do apologise, I don't know them all off by heart, but I do know that there are a lot of wonderful tribes that exist, from Victoria all the way through to Arnhem Land and beyond. So we pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land and the traditional custodians who these stories have come from. So without further ado, let's just get into today's stories. And I am probably going to make a series out of this, because there are so many Dreamtime stories I'd love to share with you guys. So I'm going to do 5 for this video, and then we might do another one with another 5, because there are some amazing stories, and most of them are quite beautiful. Some are a little scary, but I think if you like this kind of thing, you're going to really enjoy it. So sit back, as I said, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get into today's stories from the Dreamtime. And we're starting off today with number 1, the story of the 7 sisters and the faithful lovers. In the Dreamtime, many ages ago, the cluster of stars, which we now know as the Pleiades, or the 7 sisters, were 7 beautiful ice maidens. Their parents were a great rugged mountain whose dark head was hidden in the clouds, and an ice-cold stream that flowed from the snow-clad hills. The 7 sisters wandered across the land, with their long hair flying behind them like storm clouds before the breeze. Their cheeks were flushed with the kiss of the sun, and in their eyes was hidden the soft, grey light of dawn. So entrancing was their beauty that all men loved them, but the maidens' affections were as cold as the stream which gave them birth, and they never turned aside in their wanderings to gladden the hearts of men. One day a man named Warriner, by a cunning device, captured 2 of the Ice Maidens and forced them to live with him, while their 5 sisters travelled to their home in the sky. When Warriner discovered the sisters whom he had captured were Ice Maidens, whose beautiful tresses were like the icicles that drooped from the trees in the winter time, he was a little bit disappointed. So he took them to a campfire and endeavoured to melt the cold crystals from their beautiful limbs. But as the ice melted, the water quenched the fire, and he succeeded in only dimming their icy brightness. The 2 sisters were very lonely and sad in their captivity, and longed for their home in the clear blue sky. When the shadow of night was over the land, they could see their 5 sisters beckoning to them as they twinkled afar off. One day, Warriner told them to gather pine bark in the forest. After a short journey, they came to a great pine tree and commenced to strip the bark from it. As they did so, the pine tree, which belonged to the same totem as the maidens, extended itself to the sky. The maidens took advantage of this friendly act and climbed to the home of their sisters, but they never regained their original brightness. And that is the reason why there are 5 bright stars and 2 dim ones in the group of the Pleiades. The 7 sisters have not forgotten the earth folk. When the snow falls softly, they lose their wonderful tresses to the caress of the breeze, to remind us of their journey across the land. When the 7 sisters were on earth, of all the men who loved them, the Barai, or 2 brothers, were the most faithful. When they hunted in the forest or waded in the tall reeds for the wild duck, they always brought the choicest of morsels of the chase as an offering to the sisters. When the maidens wandered far across the mountains, the Barai followed them, but their love was not favoured. When the maidens set out on their long journey to the sky, the Barai were grieved and said, "Long have we loved you and followed in your footsteps, O maidens of the dawn, and when you have left us, we will hunt no more." And they laid aside their weapons and mourned for the maidens until the dark shadow of death fell upon them. When they died, the fairies pitied them and placed them in the sky where they could hear the sisters singing. Thus were they happily rewarded for their consistency. On a starry night you will see them listening to the song of the 7 sisters. We would call them Orion's sword or belt, but it is a happier thought to remember them as the faithful lovers who listen to the song of the sisters from the birth of time. So next time you're contemplating the night sky, look for the sisters and the Barai. Number 2, Thungeen, the rainbow, and the wandering boys. Far to the west in the deep blue sea there dwells a great serpent named Thungeen. His scales are of many shimmering colours, and when a rainbow appears in the sky, it is Thungeen, curving his back and the sun reflecting off the colours of his scales. Many years ago, a tribe camped close to the sea beach. One morning, they all went out to fish and hunt with the exception of 2 little boys, whom the old men left in charge of the camp. Wander not into the forest, lest the wild dogs eat you, or to the beach, where Thungeen the serpent is waiting for children who wander alone. This was the parting advice of the old men to the boys. When the men had departed, the boys played about the camp for a while, but they soon grew tired of their games. The day was very hot, and in the distance the boys could hear the dull, deep booming of the surf. Both the boys were longing to go to the beach, but were afraid to speak their desire. At last the elder boy spoke and said, "The fires of the sun are burning bright today, but on the breeze I can feel the cool breath of the sea. Let us go to the beach, and we shall return before the shadow of night has fallen. The old men will not know." The other boy hesitated and was afraid, but at last he yielded, and together they wandered hand in hand through the bush. After walking for some time, they came to an opening in the trees, and before their expectant gaze a wonderful scene unfolded. A golden beach stretched far away until it was lost to view in the dim distance. The cool waves rolled lazily in the great green billows from the outer reef and dashed in a haze of sparkling white foam on the hot sands of the palm-fringed beach. The song of the sea rose in the deep, loud booming, and gradually died away to a low, soft murmuring. The boys were lost in wonder at the beauty of the scene. Never had they seen such an expanse of water sparkling in the sun like the blue sky. Over its rippled surface, the shadows of the clouds floated like sails across the sun. Thungeen the serpent had seen the boys coming from afar, and while they played on the beach, he swam swiftly and silently to the shore and seized them. When the men arrived at the camp, they discovered the absence of the boys. They searched the bush all through the night, and at dawn came to the beach. Far from the shore, they saw 2 black rocks jutting out of the sea. They then knew that Thungeen had taken the wandering boys and turned them into rocks. The men turned their faces again towards the camp. Their hearts were heavy and their thoughts were sad. To this day, the rocks between Double Island Point and Inship Point, when a rainbow appears in the sky, the old men of the tribe tell the story of the disobedience and the punishment of the wandering boys. So that story probably came about as a lesson. Please listen to your elders. They know better than you. Number 3. Why the whale spouts, the starfish is ragged, and the native bear has strong arms. Many years ago, when this old world was young, and all the animals now living in Australia were men. At that time, they lived in a distant land across the ocean, and having heard of the wonderful hunting grounds in Australia, they determined to leave their country and sail to this sunny land in a canoe. They knew that the voyage would be long and dangerous. Storms would sweep across the sea and lash the waves into a white fury. The wind would howl like the evil spirits of the forest, the lightning flash across the sky like wreathing gold snakes, and death would hide in waiting for them beneath the brown sea kelp. It was therefore necessary for them to have a very strong canoe for the journey. The whale, who was the biggest of all the men, had a great strong canoe that could weather the wildest storm, but he was a very selfish fellow and would not allow anybody the use of it. As it was necessary to have the canoe, his companions watched for a suitable opportunity to steal it and start on their long and lonely journey. But the whale was a cunning creature. He always kept very strict guard over the canoe and would not leave it alone even for a moment. The other people were at their wits' end to solve the problem of stealing the canoe, and as a last resource, they held a great council to consider the question. Many suggestions were put forward, but none was practical. It seemed an impossible task until the starfish came forward to place his suggestion before the council. Now, the starfish was a very intimate friend of the whale, so when he spoke, everybody was very silent and attentive. He hesitated for a moment and then said, "Unless we get a very big canoe, it will be impossible to sail to the new hunting grounds, where the fire of the sun never dies. The sea sand is soft and golden, and there is plenty of food. I shall get my friend the whale to leave his canoe, and I shall keep him interested for a long time. When I give you the signal, steal silently away with it as fast as you can." The other men were so excited at the proposal that they all spoke at once and asked, "How will you do it?" But the starfish looked very wise and said, "Your business is to steal the canoe, and mine to keep the whale occupied while you do it." Ooh, hush, hush. Some days later, the starfish paid a friendly visit to the whale, and after talking for some time, he said, "I have noticed that a great number of vermin are in your hair. You must be very uncomfortable. Let me catch them for you." The whale, being greatly troubled with vermin in his head, readily agreed to the kind offer of his friend, the starfish. The whale moored the canoe in deep water and sat on a rock. Starfish placed his friend's head in his lap and proceeded to hunt diligently for the vermin. I'm trying not to laugh while reading this because that's actually kind of funny. So while he was doing this, he told many funny stories to keep the whale occupied and keep his attention. The starfish then gave the signal to the men who were waiting, and they seized the canoe and they sailed off. But the whale was very suspicious, For a short time he would forget his canoe, and then he would suddenly remember it and say, "Is my canoe all right?" The starfish had cunningly provided himself with a piece of bark, and tapping it on the rock in imitation of the boat bumping with the rise and fall of the sea, he would answer, "Yes, this is it. I am tapping it with my hand. It is a very fine canoe." He's not a very good friend. He's very sneaky. He continued to tell funny stories to the whale, and at the same time he scratched very hard around his ears in order to silence the sound of the oars splashing in the water as the other men rowed away with the canoe. After some time, the whale grew tired of his friend's attention and storytelling, and decided to have a look at the canoe himself. When he looked around and found the canoe missing, he could hardly believe it. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, and away in the distance he could see the vanishing shape of his canoe. Then the truth dawned upon him that he had been tricked, and as you can imagine, this didn't go down too well. The whale was very angry and beat the starfish mercilessly. Throwing him upon the rocks, he made great ragged cuts in the faithless creature. The starfish was so exhausted that he rolled off the rocks and hid himself in the soft sand. It is on account of this cruel beating that even to present day, the starfish has a very ragged and torn appearance and always hides himself in the sand. After beating the friend who had betrayed him, the whale jumped into the water and chased the man in the canoe. The great white waves rose and fell as he churned his way through the water, and out of the wound in his head, which the starfish had made, he spouted water high into the air. The whale continued his relentless chase. The men in the canoe saw him. They said, "He is gaining on us, and when he catches us, we should all be drowned." But the native bear, who was in charge of the oars, said, "There is no need to be afraid. Look at my arms. They are strong enough to row the canoe out of danger." This reassured the companions, and the chase continued. The voyage lasted many days and nights. During the day, the hot sun beat down on the men in the canoe, and at night the cold winds chilled them. But there was no escape. They must go on. By day and night they could see the whale spouting in his fury and churning the sea into foam with the lashing of his tail. At last land was sighted, and the men rowed very fast towards it. When they landed from the canoe, they were very weary and sat down on the sand to rest. But the native companion, who was always a very lively fellow and fond of dancing, danced upon the bottom of the canoe until he made a hole in it. He then pushed it a short distance from the shore, where it settled down in the water and became the small island that is now the entrance of Lake Illawarra. When the whale arrived at the landing place, he saw the men on the shore and his canoe wrecked. He travelled along the coast and spouted water through with anger as he thought of the trick that had been played on him and the wreck of his beloved canoe. The poor whale. I feel sorry for the whale. He was totally gypped and betrayed. Even to this present day, whales spout. The starfish is ragged and torn, and the native bear has very strong forepaws, and the tribes still roam across the wild wastes of Australia. I have to say, I think that the whale really got done wrong in that story, and so I'm kind of on the side of the whale on this one. I feel very sad for the whale. He lost his canoe, he lost his friend, and then he was destined to just travel alone, spurting water high into the air as he never got over the rage of the betrayal. It's a pretty sad story. Number 4, why tribesmen never travel alone. A legend of the Wallaroo and the Willy Wagtail. Alone on a rocky ridge high in the mountains, a Wallaroo made his camping ground beneath the shady boughs of a mountain ash. He was very old and infirm and too weak to hunt for food. So he sat by his campfire all the day and lashed the ground with his strong tail. The low, rhythmic thud, thud, thud of its beating could be heard above the songs of the birds. One day a paddy melon was passing close by the camp when he heard the beating of the Wallaroo's tail. After following the direction of the sound, he came to the camp and asked the Wallaroo if he was in trouble. "I am very sick," the Wallaroo replied. "Many times I have seen the snow on the mountains, and I am growing too old to hunt. My brothers have gone to the river beyond the hills to spear fish for me, but they have not returned, and I am very hungry." The paddy melon was sorry for the old Wallaroo and offered to go to the river in search of the fishermen. He walked a short distance from the camp when the Wallaroo called after him, You'd better take my boomerang with you, as you may meet some game on your way. The Pattymellen turned around and said, "All right, I shall take it, throw it to me." The crafty Wallaroo picked up the boomerang and, taking careful aim, threw it with all its strength. It struck the unfortunate Pattymellen with a terrible blow and killed him. The Wallaroo took the fur from the dead animal and prepared the body to cook. He dug a hole in the ground, lined it with stones, placed the meat in it, and covered it with flat stones. He then built a fire over it and in time had cooked a tasty meal. Oh, the poor Pattymellen, these stories are getting worse. The Pattymellen did not return home, and his relatives became very anxious about him. At last, an iguana offered to go in search of the missing member of the tribe. He followed the tracks of the Pattymellen through the bush, and they led to the camp of the Wallaroo. When the iguana approached the camp, the Wallaroo was beating his tail on the ground, and the iguana asked him if he needed any assistance. Here we go again. In a plaintive voice, the Wallaroo told him the same tale that had been told to the unlucky Pattymellen. Again, the iguana was also sorry for the old Wallaroo and offered to seek his relatives for him and tell them of his plight. When he turned to go, the Wallaroo asked him if he would take a spear with him in case he met game on his way. The iguana said, "Sure, I will take it, throw it to me." The Wallaroo had been waiting for this opportunity, and he hurled his spear so swiftly that it transfixed the iguana before he could jump aside. And as before, the Wallaroo prepared another meal. One day passed and yet another, but the iguana did not return to the hunting ground of the tribe. They sent a bandicoot in search of the iguana, but he met the same fate at the hands of the Wallaroo. After waiting anxiously for the return of the bandicoot, the headmen of the tribe called a great council. When all members were assembled together, the headsman said, "Many moons ago, our brother the Pattymellen left the camp before the sun was over the hills, and when the night came he did not return, and his shadow has not darkened the ground for many days. The iguana went in search of him. He is a great hunter, but he has not returned. Yesterday the bandicoot followed in their tracks, but I fear the shadow of death has fallen over them. We must find them." Many suggestions were placed before the council, but none of them seemed practical. Then the Willy Wagtail, who was a clever medicine man, spoke. "Long have we waited for the return of our brothers, and yet we do not hear their call. I shall follow their footsteps, even to the shadowy hunting ground of death, but I shall return to you." The council consented to the Willy Wagtail's proposal, but they were afraid that he would walk into the land of silence and never return. Before dawn, the Willy Wagtail started on his dangerous and lonely journey. When he reached the summit of the mountain, he could see far in the distance the grey smoke of the campfires wreathing slowly above the trees. With a sad but brave heart, he continued his journey. After travelling for some time, he heard the sound of the Wallaroo beating his tail on the ground. At first he thought the Wallaroo was hopping through the bush, but as the sound did not grow louder or fainter, he became suspicious and approached the camp very cautiously. The Wallaroo saw him approaching and called to him, told him the same story as before. The Willy Wagtail offered to seek his relatives for him, and with his intention started on his way. When he had gone a short distance, the Wallaroo offered him a boomerang. The Willy Wagtail was very suspicious in his intention and said, "Throw it to me, it will save me the trouble of walking back to the tree." The Wallaroo then threw the weapon with all his strength, but the Willy Wagtail was prepared, and as soon as the boomerang left the hand of the thrower, he jumped quickly aside. When the Wallaroo saw he had missed his mark and that his evil intentions were known to the Willy Wagtail, he became furious and threw all his spears and nulla-nullas at him, but failed to strike him. Then the Willy Wagtail took the boomerang and threw it at the old Wallaroo. It struck him a heavy blow on the chest and killed him. And as you can imagine, as follows. The Willy Wagtail prepared to cook his flesh, but he was too old and tough to eat. He now took the skin and returned to the camp. When he told the tribe of the fate of their brothers, they were sorely grieved, but their grief was turned to joy when the Willy Wagtail showed them the skin of their enemy. The Wagtail was rewarded by being a headman of the tribe. The headman now decided that the tribesmen should never travel alone. As a mark of remembrance, Wallaroos have always had a strip of white fur on their breasts. It is an indication of the boomerang wound that killed the old Wallaroo of Mountain Ridge. And I guess back then the Wallaroo was kind of like a serial killer. He was like the Hannibal Lecter of the bush. So not all of these stories are happy or nice, but this is the Oz Files, or the Oz X-Files, and it kind of suits the mood of the channel and of this segment of it. And now we're on to number 5, and I'll save the best to last, and this is the story I remember hearing the most as a child, hearing it from the elders themselves, and it has remained, oh my god, my most favourite Dreamtime story of them all, and it's probably one of the most famous. And at number 5, we have the Rainbow Serpent. Long ago in the Dreamtime, when the earth lay sleeping and nothing moved or grew, lived the Rainbow Serpent. Then one day the Rainbow Serpent awoke and came out from beneath the earth. Refreshed from her long slumber, she travelled far and wide, leaving winding tracks from her huge body and then returning to the place she had first appeared. On her return, she called to the frogs, "Come out." The frogs came out slowly as their bellies were full with water, which they had stored during their long sleep. The Rainbow Serpent tickled their stomachs, and when the frogs laughed, the water spilled out all over the earth to fill the tracks of the Rainbow Serpent. This is how the lakes and rivers were first formed. With water, grass and trees began to grow, which woke all the animals, who then followed the Rainbow Serpent across the land. They were happy on earth, and each lived and gathered food with their own tribe. Some animals lived in rocks, some on vast plains, and others in the trees and sky. The Rainbow Serpent made laws that they were all to obey, but some began to make trouble and argue. The Rainbow Serpent said, "Those who keep my laws will be rewarded. I will give them human form. Those who break my laws will be punished and turned to stone and will never walk the earth again." Those who broke the law became stoned and were turned into the mountains and hills, and those who were obedient were turned into human form and were each given their own totem of the animal, bird, or reptile from which they began. The tribes knew themselves by their totems: kangaroo, emu, carpet snake, and many more. So no one would starve. The Rainbow Serpent ruled that no man should eat of his totem, but only of other totems. This way there was food for everyone. The tribes lived on together on the land given to them by the Rainbow Serpent, or the Mother of Life, and knew the land would always be theirs and that no one should ever take it from them. And there you have it. That is our 5 Indigenous stories and legends from the Dreamtime, from our wonderful Indigenous tribes here in Australia. And I love the Rainbow Serpent. I think it's one of their most beautiful Dreamtime stories, and it kind of makes sense when you see some of the rocks and things. A lot of them do look like faces or animals, and I think it's just really fascinating that these are the beliefs of our Indigenous people over here. And I think some of them are beautiful, as you can see. Some of them are not, but every culture has their beautiful stories and their not so beautiful stories, and this was just a few from the Dreamtime. We will revisit some Dreamtime stories in a future video, and Sam, I hope you really enjoyed these. There will be more for you in the future. So thank you all again for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the Dreamtime stories and some of the Australian images I managed to get for you guys. And if you've ever wanted to come to Australia, you would absolutely love it here. Just as I've always said before, please play it safe. If you wanted to come and check out like the bush and the outback and stuff, always go with a tour, always go with guides, always go with a lot of people, because as you've seen in my other videos, things do tend to go awry out here, and the outback and the bush are the number one places it kind of happens. So please stay safe, everybody, and I will see you all again in my next video. I have a lot more coming for you. We are working currently on getting permission to do a paranormal investigation in a very historic location in Grafton, hopefully towards the end of July. So fingers crossed that everything goes well and we get granted permission to film there. The location we are trying to get permission to film that, we actually had to write a proposal to the committee that runs the place, But once we get confirmation, I'll let you guys know. I'm not going to tell you where we're going to film that because that's a surprise as always. But if we get permission, it's going to be a cracker of a location. I think you guys are really going to love it. So please stay tuned for announcements regarding that. And we'll have more true crime. We'll have more disasters, more unsolved cases, more Oz Files, The Truth Is Out There. And, of course, more missing people. So thank you guys so much for tuning in again. Please don't forget to leave your suggestions for other things you'd like me to cover on the channel in the comment section below. And I'll see you all soon. Bye.